Poor girl uses her last coins to pay for a bus fare for a disguised millionaire drug lord, and he falls madly in love. Hey there, I'm Alex, your guide through today's extraordinary tale on Hearts of Crime. What you're about to witness is a story of passion and danger that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, when I say the twist at the end will leave you absolutely speechless. If you enjoy these forbidden love stories, please hit that like button and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our daily uploads of these incredible stories. Stay with me until the very end. I promise the conclusion will shock you in ways you can't imagine. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. Have a wonderful day, and may God bless you and your family. Unexpected kindness. Part 1. The rain pounded mercilessly against the bus shelter's plastic roof as Paula counted the coins in her palm for the third time. Just enough for one ride, the ride that would take her to her second job of the day. Her fingers trembled, partly from the cold, partly from exhaustion. The morning shift at the diner had been brutal, and now she had to muster the energy for a night of cleaning offices in the financial district. A sleek black car splashed through a puddle nearby, drenching her already soaked shoes. Paula didn't even have the energy to curse. That's just how life worked for people like her, one small indignity after another. The bus appeared in the distance, its headlights cutting through the downpour. As it wheezed to a stop, Paula clutched her coins tighter and joined the line of passengers seeking shelter from the storm. That has when she noticed him, a man in a shabby coat patting his pockets frantically. He was tall with striking features that even his unkempt beard couldn't hide. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was something about him that seemed oddly out of place. "I must have dropped my wallet," he muttered, his voice carrying an unexpected refinement. The bus driver sighed impatiently. "No fare, no ride, buddy. I've got a schedule to keep." Paula watched the man's shoulders slump. Something in his eyes, a flash of vulnerability perhaps, made her step forward. "Here," she said, placing her coins in the collection box. "This covers both of us." The man's eyes widened in surprise. "I cannot take your—" "It is fine," Paula interrupted, already moving toward the back of the bus. "Just a bit of good karma, that is all." What Paula didn't know was that the man who now followed her down the aisle wasn't who he appeared to be. Dominic Ramirez wasn't missing his wallet, he wasn't struggling financially, and he certainly wasn't in need of charity. Dominic sank into the seat across from Paula, studying her reflection in the rain-streaked window. She was beautiful in an unassuming way. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, warm brown eyes that looked tired but kind, and hands that showed signs of hard work. Her gesture had caught him completely off guard. 3 hours earlier, Dominic had left his fortified estate on the hill overlooking the city, a compound protected by state-of-the-art security and armed guards. He had traded his tailored suit for worn clothes and covered his distinctive features with a fake beard. Tonight was one of his periodic ventures into the city he controlled from the shadows. Dominic Ramirez was many things: businessman, philanthropist, and, unknown to most, the calculated force behind the city's most profitable drug distribution network. His legitimate businesses were merely a front for an empire built on cocaine and heroin. He was feared by his enemies and respected by his associates, but never, ever pitied. Until today. "Thank you," he said softly to Paula. "Not many people would do that for a stranger." She shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "Been there before. Sometimes you just need someone to spot you." "I am Marcus," he lied effortlessly, extending his hand. "Paula," she replied, hesitating before shaking it. Her hand was warm despite the cold day. "Let me pay you back," he insisted, pretending to find a crumpled bill in his pocket. Paula shook her head. "Keep it. Looks like you need it more than me." If only she knew the billions he had stashed in offshore accounts, the fleet of cars collecting dust in his garage, the properties he owned across 5 continents. The irony wasn't lost on Dominic. For years, he had manipulated, threatened, and bribed his way to the top. He had forgotten what simple human kindness looked like. "Where are you headed?" he asked, genuinely curious about this woman who had nothing yet gave what little she had. "Downtown. Night cleaning job," and she replied, stifling a yawn. You work 2 jobs. 3, actually. Diner in the mornings, online transcription in between, and cleaning at night. She smiled thinly, working towards something better. The bus jolted over a pothole, and Paula's worn bag spilled its contents onto the floor. Dominic helped her gather her things: a dog-eared textbook on business administration, a half-empty water bottle, a carefully wrapped sandwich, and a small photo of a younger Paula with an elderly woman. "Sorry about the mess," she mumbled, embarrassed. "Is that your mother?" he asked, pointing to the photo. Paula's expression softened. "Grandmother. Raised me after my parents. Well, after they couldn't. She's in a care facility now, part of why I work so much." Dominic felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. In his world, everyone wanted something from him: money, power, protection. Paula wanted nothing. She had helped him, expecting nothing in return. It was refreshing, disarming, dangerous. The bus neared the financial district where gleaming skyscrapers reached toward the sky. One of them, the tallest, bore the name Ramirez Enterprises. Paula followed his gaze. "Beautiful, isn't it? Hard to imagine what it is like up there," she said. "It is probably not what you think," Dominic replied, knowing exactly how cold and calculating life was at the top. "Maybe not, but at least the view must be nice." She smiled, and for a moment, Dominic saw a glimpse of the dreamer behind the exhaustion. Paula pulled the stop cord. "This is me. It was nice meeting you, Marcus." As she stood to leave, Dominic made a split-second decision. "Which building do you clean?" "Down the Carlton on 5th. Why?" "I came heading that way too. Mind if I walk with you?" Paula hesitated, then nodded. There was something about this man that intrigued her. Despite his appearance, he carried himself with an undeniable confidence. His eyes, sharp and observant, seemed to take in everything. For a homeless man, he was remarkably well-spoken. Little did she know that her small act of kindness had caught the attention of one of the most dangerous men in the city, a man who had everything money could buy, but had forgotten what it meant to be seen as human. As they stepped off the bus into the rain, neither of them could have predicted how their lives were about to change. For Paula, it was just another night of hard work and dreams deferred. For Dominic, it was the beginning of a dangerous fascination with a woman who had shown him the one thing his money couldn't buy: genuine compassion. And somewhere in the shadows, the eyes of Dominic's enemies watched, always waiting for a weakness to exploit. They wouldn't have to wait much longer. Unexpected Kindness, Part 2. The Carlton building stood like a gleaming monolith against the night sky, its windows reflecting the city lights like countless stars. Paula swiped her employee badge at the service entrance, aware of Marcus walking beside her. "This is where we part ways," she said with a small smile. "Unless you were secretly a janitor too." Dominic returned her smile, his mind racing. He owned this building, one of many properties in his legitimate business portfolio, yet here he was, pretending to be a drifter. The thrill of deception was familiar to him, but this felt different somehow. "Actually," he improvised, "I was going to ask if they might have any openings. Between opportunities at the moment." Paula studied him for a moment, and Dominic wondered if she could see through his facade. After all, few people in his world dared to look him directly in the eyes. "Let me talk to my supervisor," she said finally. "No promises, but we're usually short-staffed. Can you be here tomorrow night?" "I can," Dominic replied, already contemplating how to extend his masquerade. It was reckless, potentially dangerous for his operation, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward this woman. As they parted ways, Paula hesitated. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." She reached into her bag and pulled out her wrapped sandwich. "Here, you probably need this more than I do." Dominic stared at the offering, momentarily speechless. In his world, transactions were clear: money for loyalty, threats for compliance. This undemanding generosity was foreign territory. Thank you," he managed, taking the sandwich. Their fingers brushed, and he noticed how rough her hands were, hands that worked hard for everything they had. He waited until she disappeared inside before walking around to the front of the building. His chauffeur, Nathan, was parked discreetly across the street. The trusted employee raised an eyebrow at his boss. S appearance, but knew better than to comment. "Home, sir? Shall I drive around for a while first?" Dominic ordered, unwrapping Paula's sandwich in the back seat. Peanut butter and jelly, probably the cheapest meal she could manage. He took a bite, trying to remember the last time he'd eaten something so simple. "Interesting night, sir," Nathan ventured, catching Dominic's eye in the rearview mirror. "You could say that." Dominic stared out the window at the city streets, his streets. "I met someone unexpected." So the next evening, Paula was surprised to see Marcus waiting outside the service entrance. He had trimmed his beard and found cleaner clothes, but still maintained the appearance of a man down on his luck. "You came," she said, unable to hide her smile. "You offered help. I'd be a fool not to take it." Her supervisor, a gruff man named Harold, eyed Dominic suspiciously, but was too desperate for workers to turn him away. After a quick interview consisting mainly of whether Dominic could operate basic cleaning equipment, Marcus was hired on a probationary basis. Thus began Dominic's double life. By day, he ran his empire from his penthouse or his secluded estate, issuing orders and overseeing shipments. By night, he mopped floors alongside Paula, learning about a world he had only observed from a distance. Paula was full of questions that first week. "Where are you from originally?" So she asked as they cleaned the 40th floor, ironically just 3 floors below Ramirez Enterprises' headquarters. "West Coast," Dominic answered vaguely. "Came east, looking for opportunities." "Family?" "None to speak of." That, at least, wasn't it a lie? His parents had died long ago, leaving him a modest business that he'd transformed through ruthless determination and strategic alliances with the underworld. "That is something we have in common, then," Paula said. "Just my grandmother and me against the world." As the nights passed, Dominic found himself sharing more with Paula than he had with anyone in years. He carefully edited his stories, transforming business negotiations into job interviews and territorial disputes into workplace conflicts. But the essence was often true. Paula, in turn, opened up about her life. Growing up in a struggling neighborhood, losing her parents to addiction, her grandmother's sacrifices to give her a stable home, and her determination to build something better. She was taking online classes, saving every penny to finish her business degree. "What is your dream?" Dominic asked her one night as they ate lunch on the rooftop garden of the Carlton. He'd had discovered that the building he owned had this peaceful retreat for employees, something he'd never bothered to visit before. "A small business of my own," Paula replied, her eyes bright with ambition. "Nothing fancy. A cafe, maybe, or a bookstore. Something that is mine, you know, where I make the rules and reap the rewards." Dominic nodded, thinking of his own empire. And what would those rules be? Fair pay, respect for everyone, second chances for people who need them. She glanced at him. Like the chance Harold gave you. Guilt twisted in Dominic's stomach. Every night he spent playing this game was another night of lies. Yet he couldn't stop. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt like a person rather than a position. Meanwhile, in Dominic's other world, things were becoming complicated. His unexpected absences had been noticed. Victor Gallo, his second-in-command, confronted him in his office one afternoon. "3 shipments delayed because you weren't available to approve the routes," Victor said, his tone carefully neutral. "The Colombians are asking questions." "The Colombians work for me, not the other way around," Dominic replied coldly, "and I don't owe them or you explanations for my time." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course not. I merely thought you should know that rumors are circulating, people wondering if perhaps your focus has shifted." The threat was veiled but clear. In their world, perceived weakness was a death sentence. Dominic had eliminated predecessors for less. "Thank you for your concern," Dominic said, leaning forward. "Now shall we discuss why the Eastern District returns are down 17% under your management?" Victor backed down, but Dominic knew the conversation wasn't over. His nightly disappearances had created a vulnerability. The smart move would be to end this charade immediately. But that night, he found himself once again changing into worn clothes, affixing his fake beard, and heading to the Carlton building. "You were distracted tonight," Paula observed, as they worked side by side, polishing the endless glass walls of the executive conference room. Dominic forced a smile. "Just tired." "You were always tired lately, Son," she said. "Is everything okay? You're not, into anything bad, are you?" He almost laughed at the irony. If she only knew that the bad things he was involved in funded the luxury cars that passed her on the street, the designer drugs that flowed through the clubs she couldn't afford to enter, the violence that occasionally erupted in neighborhoods like hers. "No," he lied. "Nothing like that." Paula looked relieved. "Good, because I think you're better than that, Marcus. I see something in you, something special." Her words struck him with unexpected force. In his real life, people feared him, respected him, obeyed him, but did anyone truly see him? Or did they only see Dominic Ramirez, the untouchable kingpin, the businessman, the legend? "You don't really know me," he said quietly. "Maybe not everything," she admitted. "Sas, but I know you re-smart. Way too smart to be cleaning floors. I know you re-kind even though you try to hide it. And I know you re-running from something." She touched his arm gently. "We all are in some way." The warmth of her touch lingered long after she moved away. It was becoming increasingly difficult to remember that this wasn't real, that Marcus was a fiction, a temporary escape from the empire he de-built, an empire that was growing restless in his absence. That weekend, Dominic invited Paula to a street fair downtown. It was a calculated risk, being seen in public together, but he'd taken precautions, maintaining his disguise and choosing an area where his associates rarely ventured. Paula wore a simple summer dress, her hair loose for once, and Dominic was struck again by her natural beauty. No expensive cosmetics, no designer clothes, just Paula, authentic and unassuming. "This is nice," she said as they wandered through the stalls. "I can remember the last time I just had fun." Dominic bought her a handmade bracelet from a local artisan, insisting when she protested the expense. "You've been sharing your lunch with me for weeks," he reminded her. "Let me give you something for once." As he fastened the bracelet around her wrist, their eyes met. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Dominic leaned closer, drawn by something more powerful than reason. Then his world collided with hers. "Mr. Ramirez?" The voice came from behind him, one of his legitimate business associates, a banker who had helped launder millions through offshore accounts. "I thought that was you. What an unexpected pleasure to see you in this part of town." Paula looked confused. "Marcus? Who is he talking to?" Dominic froze, caught between his two lives. The banker, sensing the tension, glanced between them. "My apologies. I must have mistaken you for someone else," he said smoothly, backing away. But the damage was done. "What was that about?" Paula asked, her expression wary. "I have no idea," Dominic lied, cursing his carelessness. "Must have confused me with someone else." Paula seemed to accept this, but something had shifted. The easy companionship of earlier was replaced by an undercurrent of tension. Dominic was acutely aware that his carefully constructed facade had cracks. They continued through the fair, but Dominic's mind was elsewhere. The banker would report this encounter. Victor and others would question why Dominic Ramirez was wandering a street fair in disguise with an unknown woman. It wouldn't take much for them to connect the dots to Paula. He had put her in danger without her knowledge or consent. Days later, the hammer fell. Dominic was reviewing financial statements in his penthouse when Victor entered carrying a tablet. "I thought you might find this interesting," Victor said, sliding the tablet across the desk. On the screen was a photo of Dominic and Paula at the street fair, alongside her employment records from the Carlton building. Her address, work history, and even her grandmother's care facility were highlighted. "She's very pretty," Victor observed, though not your usual type. Dominic kept his expression neutral, despite the rage and fear churning inside him. "You're monitoring me now, protecting our interests," Victor corrected. "When the head of our organization starts behaving erratically, spending nights mopping floors with the cleaning staff, it becomes everyone's concern." He paused. "Does she know who you really are? What you really do?" "Leave her out of this," Dominic said, his voice deadly calm. Victor spread his hands. Once I merely wanted to meet the woman who is captivated you so completely. Perhaps invite her to dinner, get to know her better. The threat was unmistakable. In their world, loved ones were leverage. Dominic had used this tactic himself countless times. That one to be necessary, Han, he said. The situation is being handled. After Victor left, Dominic smashed the tablet against the wall. He had been careless, selfish, putting his own desires above operational security. Worse, he had put Paula in the crosshairs of people who wouldn't hesitate to use her against him. He had a decision to make. Paula was surprised to receive a call asking her to report to the executive level of Ramirez Enterprises for a special cleaning assignment. More surprising was the generous bonus offered for this one-time task. As she rode the elevator up, she couldn't help but feel nervous. Something about this didn't feel right, but the extra money would help with her grandmother's medical bills, which had increased recently. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city. Paula had never been this high up before, had never seen her world from such an elevation. "Hello?" she called, setting down her cleaning cart. "Hello, Paula?" She froze at the familiar voice. Marcus stepped from the shadows, but he wasn't a Marcus anymore. Gone was the beard, the shabby clothes, the humble demeanor. In their place stood a man in an impeccably tailored suit, his face clean-shaven and handsome, his posture radiating authority. "I don't understand," Paula said, taking a step back. "What is this? Where is Marcus?" "There is no Marcus," he said quietly. "My name is Dominic Ramirez. This is my company. This is my building." Paula stared at him, disbelief giving way to understanding and then to hurt. "You've been lying to me all this time." "Yes." "Why?" The simple question carried the weight of all the hours they had spent together, all the conversations, all the growing feelings between them. Dominic struggled to find an answer that wouldn't make things worse. It started as curiosity. "No one had ever done what you did, helped me without wanting anything in return. I wanted to understand." "Okay, so I was what? Some kind of social experiment?" Paula's voice shook with anger and betrayal. "Poor people are so fascinating, aren't they? How we live, how we struggle, all for your entertainment." "It wasn't like that," Dominic insisted. "What happened between us, what I felt, that was real." "How can I believe anything you say?" Paula demanded. "You lied about everything, your name, your life, who you are." "Not everything," Dominic said. "Not what matters." Paula laughed bitterly. "You own the building I clean, you probably own half the city. What could you possibly want from someone like me?" The question hung in the air between them. What did he want? The simple connection they had shared? The way she saw him as a person rather than a power? Or was it just the thrill of deception, another game for a man who had everything except authenticity? "I wanted something real," he said finally. "You made me feel human." "I don't even know who you are," Paula said, her voice breaking. Dominic took a step toward her, but she backed away. "You know me better than anyone," he insisted. "The circumstances were false, but what I shared with you was Nick. Paula shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "I trusted you. I thought you were someone who understood what it's like to struggle, to work for everything you have." "I did struggle," Dominic said. "Just a long time ago." A heavy silence fell between them. Through the windows the city stretched out, her world and his separated by wealth and power, and now by broken trust. "Why tell me now?" Paula asked finally. "Why bring me here?" Dominic's expression darkened. "Because you were in danger. People in my organization have noticed my interest in you. They see you as a weakness to exploit." "Your organization? What are you talking about?" This was the moment, the point of no return. Tell her everything and risk watching the warmth in her eyes turn to disgust and fear, or continue the deception and put her at even greater risk. "My business interests extend beyond what you see here," he said carefully. "Not all of them are legitimate." Understanding dawned on Paula's face. "You're a criminal." The word hung in the air between them, stark and unforgiving. Dominic didn't deny it. "I've arranged for your protection," he said instead. "A new apartment in a secure building. A position at one of my legitimate companies, funds to complete your education, and round-the-clock security for both you and your grandmother. Paula stared at him, incredulous. You think you can just buy me? Move me around like a piece on your chessboard? I am trying to keep you safe, Dominic insisted, frustration edging into his voice. He wasn't accustomed to having his solutions rejected. Safe from what? From whom? From the consequences of your actions? Paula shook her head. I didn't ask for any of this. I was just trying to live my life. A life of cleaning other people's messes, of working yourself to exhaustion for scraps. Dominic regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth. Paula's expression hardened. Yes, an honest life, something you wouldn't understand. The barb struck deeper than she could know. There had been a time long ago when Dominic had been on a different path. Before the first compromise, the first shortcut, the first crime that led to an empire built on suffering. I am offering you a chance at something better, he said. Better for whom? Paula asked. You get to salve your conscience, keep me as what? Your charity case, your pet project, while you go back to whatever illegal activities you were involved in. Dominic had no answer. He had expected anger, hurt, even fear, but not this clear-eyed assessment that cut through his justifications. I need time to think, Paula said finally. Away from you, away from all of this. That is not safe, Dominic insisted. Victor, my associate, he knows about you, about your grandmother. These aren't people who make idle threats. Paula paled slightly at the mention of her grandmother, and Dominic knew he had struck a nerve. Her own safety she might gamble with, but not her grandmother's. 1 week, as she said, give me 1 week to sort this out on my own terms. Then she left the sentence unfinished. Dominic wanted to refuse, to insist on immediate measures, to use his power to force compliance. It was what he would have done with anyone else, but with Paula, the thought left a bitter taste in his mouth. 1 week, he agreed reluctantly, but you will accept a security detail, discreet at a distance, non-negotiable. Paula nodded stiffly. As she turned to leave, Dominic called after her. Paula, I never meant for any of this to happen. She paused at the door. That is the problem with lies, Dominic. They take on a life of their own. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Dominic was left alone in his penthouse, surrounded by the symbols of his success, feeling more empty than he had in years. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, a fitting backdrop for the turmoil that was about to engulf them both. Unexpected Kindness, Part 3. The week that followed was the longest of Dominic's life. He threw himself into work, restructuring operations, tightening security, and keeping Victor under close surveillance. Yet his thoughts constantly returned to Paula. His security team reported that she had continued her normal routine, working at the diner, visiting her grandmother, attending her online classes. She hadn't returned to her cleaning job at the Carlton. The only deviation was a meeting with a lawyer Dominic didn't recognize. Meanwhile, Victor was making moves. Shipments were being rerouted without authorization. Key personnel were being reassigned. It was a slow-motion coup executed with precision. On the 6th night, everything changed. Dominic was working late in his penthouse when his security chief called. Sir, there has been an incident at Sunset Grove Care Center. Dominic's blood ran cold. Paula, says grandmother. What happened? Someone tried to remove the elderly woman. When staff intervened, there was an altercation. Our people stepped in. The situation is contained, but what? Ms. Navarro is there. She is demanding to speak with you. Thames Paula was waiting in the care center, his private garden, her face pale with anger and fear. When she saw Dominic, she stormed toward him. This is your fault, she said, voice trembling. They could have hurt her. They would have taken her if your men hadn't been here. I know, Dominic said simply. Your associate, Victor, called me. Said this was just a taste of what would happen if I didn't convince you to refocus on business. She laughed bitterly, as if I have any influence over you. You have more than you know, Dominic said quietly. Paula looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since learning his identity. Why is this happening? What kind of business are you really in? Dominic made a decision. No more lies. I control most of the drug trade in this city and 3 neighboring states. Distribution, protection, money laundering, all of it. He expected disgust, horror, rejection. Instead, Paula just looked tired. All that money, all that power, and this is what you choose to do with it? The question struck him more deeply than condemnation would have. It wasn't always a choice, he said. After my parents died, I inherited a small import business on the verge of bankruptcy. I needed cash fast. A shipment of cocaine hidden among legitimate goods solved that problem. Then another, and another. He shrugged. So eventually I realized the legitimate business was just a front for what really made money. There is always a choice, Paula said. Every day, people like me choose honesty, despite having nothing. You chose differently. Dominic had no answer for that. Your grandmother will be moved to a private medical facility tonight, he said instead. The best care, total security. And me? Paula asked. That depends on you. 3 hours later, they sat in Dominic's private study in his hillside mansion. Paula looked out of place amid the luxury, but not uncomfortable, as though the trappings of wealth were interesting but ultimately unimportant to her. Victor wanted to stop, Dominic explained. He has been waiting for an opportunity like this. In our world, personal connections are vulnerabilities, which is why you never had any, Paula observed, until you. The admission hung in the air between them. So what now? Paula asked. I go into hiding, live in fear, change my identity. There is another option, Dominic said hesitantly. I've built something complicated. Morally wrong, yes, but complex. Distribution networks that employ hundreds, protection systems that maintain a certain order. You're talking about your drug empire like it's a public service, Paula said incredulously. It is not, Dominic admitted, but it exists, and with the right leadership it could change. What are you saying? Dominic took a deep breath. I am saying I could dismantle the criminal elements gradually, shift resources to legitimate businesses, use the money for something better. He met her eyes. But I'd need help. Someone who sees things differently, someone who reminds me why change matters. Paula stared at him. You want me to help you? Reform your drug cartel. I want you to help me find my way back, Dominic said quietly, to who I could have been. That is not fair, Paula whispered. You can put that responsibility on me. You and rewrite, Dominic acknowledged. The choice is mine, the responsibility is mine. But the inspiration, that is you, Paula. That day on the bus, you showed kindness to a stranger expecting nothing in return. I hadn't experienced that in... I can remember how long. Paula was silent for a long moment. Even if you wanted to change, could you? Wouldn't Victor and others fight back? Dominic's expression hardened. Let me worry about Victor. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Victor made his move the next morning, arriving at the mansion with 6 armed men, including Dominic's head of security, who had apparently switched allegiances. They found Dominic alone in his study, seemingly unaware of the betrayal. This is unfortunate, Dominic said calmly, not rising from behind his desk. I expected at least another day before you gathered the courage. Victor smiled thinly. Always underestimating me. That has been your mistake from the beginning. One of several, it seems, Dominic agreed, glancing at his former security chief. The organization needs focused leadership, Victor said. Your distractions have become a liability. You mean Paula? The cleaning girl, yes, among other things. Sentiment is weakness in our business. True, Dominic conceded, which is why I took precautions. At that moment, the doors opened behind Victor. His men turned, weapons raised, then froze. Federal agents flooded the room, weapons drawn. Victor Gallo, announced the lead agent, you are under arrest for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, racketeering, and attempted kidnapping. Victor's face contorted with rage and disbelief as he was handcuffed. You cooperated with the feds? You'd destroy everything we built? Not everything, Dominic said. Just the parts that can be salvaged. As Victor was led away, he spat out one final question. Why for some girl who paid your bus fare? Dominic smiled faintly. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses reveal the largest truths. After the agents departed with Victor and his men, Paula emerged from a hidden chamber behind the study S bookcase. "That was your plan? Turn state S evidence?" she asked, stunned. "Part of it," Dominic admitted. "I have been working with federal prosecutors for days. Limited immunity in exchange for information on international suppliers and money laundering operations. Victor A.S. arrest buys us time." "Us?" "I meant me," Dominic corrected himself. "This is my mess to clean up." Paula studied him. "And what happens to you?" "Best case? I retain my legitimate businesses, pay substantial fines, possibly serve minimal time under house arrest. Worst case? Well, let us focus on the best case." "And the drug operations?" "Dismantled piece by piece. Some parts transitioned to legitimate enterprises, others shut down completely." Paula shook her head in amazement. "All of this in a week." "Thanasu, when properly motivated, I can be quite efficient," Dominic said with a small smile. "The question is, what will you do now? Your grandmother is safe. Your future is secure regardless of what you decide. The trust I established in your name will fund your education, your business plans, whatever you choose." "You make it sound so simple." "It is not," Dominic acknowledged. "Nothing about this situation is simple, especially—" He hesitated. "Especially what?" "So especially how I feel about you." Paula closed her eyes briefly. "I don't even know who you are, Dominic. Marcus was a lie. The drug lord is someone I can accept. Who s left?" "That s what I am trying to find out," he admitted. "But I know that when I am with you, I want to be better, do better." "I cannot be your conscience," and Paula said firmly. "No, but you can be my partner, eventually, if I earn that right." 1 year later, Paula straightened the crotent grand opening sign above the door of her new cafe. The small business occupied the ground floor of a renovated building in what had once been a struggling neighborhood. Now the area was experiencing a renaissance, with locally owned shops and community spaces replacing abandoned storefronts. The revitalization was largely funded by the Ramirez Community Development Foundation, a non-profit established as part of Dominic's plea agreement with federal authorities. Paula, its cafe, named Second Chance, was her dream realized, staffed primarily by people needing exactly that: former addicts in recovery, individuals recently released from prison, young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. The bell above the door chimed, and Paula looked up to see Dominic entering. He moved differently now. The weight of his former empire lifted from his shoulders, replaced by the different but less deadly pressures of community redevelopment. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, handing her a bouquet of flowers. "As ready as I'll ever be," Paula replied, accepting the flowers with a smile. Their relationship had evolved slowly, cautiously over the past year. Trust rebuilt in small moments, honesty practiced daily. The attraction and connection that had begun under false pretenses now stood on firmer ground. Dominic had kept his word. While retaining his legitimate businesses, he had systematically dismantled his criminal operations, working with authorities to minimize the chaos that often accompanied such power vacuums. His cooperation had resulted in dozens of arrests and the disruption of supply chains that had brought destruction to countless lives. He paid his debts to society, financially through massive fines and forfeitures, personally through monitored house arrest and community service. The man who had once controlled the city's underworld now taught business classes to former gang members and advised microloan programs for struggling entrepreneurs. "Your grandmother seemed pleased with the apartment above the cafe," Dominic observed, helping Paula arrange pastries in the display case. "She is happy to be closer to me," Paula agreed. "And to you, she is quite fond of you, despite knowing everything." "She understands transformation," Dominic said. "Better than most." Paula nodded. Her grandmother had seen something in Dominic from the beginning, not the disguised millionaire or the reformed criminal, but the man struggling to find his way back to himself. As they prepared for the customers who would soon arrive, Dominic paused. "I've been thinking about what you said that day on the bus, about good karma. And you were right. What goes around comes around." He took her hand gently. "Your kindness that day changed everything. Not just for me, but for all the people who will benefit from what we are building now. Paula squeezed his hand. We've both come a long way from that rainy bus stop. Outside, the city stretched before them, not divided into territories or markets, but united in possibility. The empire Dominic had built through fear was being replaced by communities strengthened through opportunity. And it had all begun with a simple act of kindness. A poor girl's last coins given freely to a stranger in need, never expecting anything in return. Sometimes, the smallest gestures create the largest changes. Sometimes, unexpected kindness transforms not just a life, but an entire world. As Paula flipped the sign to "Open," she and Dominic stood together, two people from different worlds who had found their way to a shared future, one small choice at a time. Wow, I told you that ending would be unexpected. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up and share your reactions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Hearts of Crime for more captivating stories, just like this one every single day. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible tale of love in the criminal underworld. Thank you for watching until the end. May God bless you and your family, and I'll see you in the next video.